Okay, and I'll start mine as well. Okay. Hi, guys. Welcome to Psychic Babes. I'm your host, Kirsten Sandifer. Today, we have two amazing guests. I want to welcome Mike and Rainbow from the True Seeker Forum and the YouTube channel Dimension Walking. Thanks, guys, for coming on today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yes.
Thanks for being had.
They're committed to the ongoing research and exploration of enlightened discussion of the paranormal. So they have a lot of interesting stories that you're going to see today are just actually phenomenal in areas that people haven't really done a whole lot of research in. So I think you're going to really be surprised with some of the discussions we're going to have today. So let's start off with, since you guys have such a varied background, explain a bit the bulk of your focus and your work and your research.
You want to take that one?
Sure. Well, I think for Michael and I, we have Michael figured out 50 years of experience in the paranormal field. And for me, I think everybody can relate to this. I was born into it from childhood, just experiences happening, the hauntings, the infamous, ghosts in the closet kind of thing, abductions, memories of the Greys, just a lot of different things that happened just from, I think, being in a family that was generationally associated with abductions. Even though they didn't know it, I found out later that I truly believe that many people in this field are generationally involved in, the alien agenda. So on my end, it was just being born into it and just dealing with it.
So, with me, I'm, I guess, a little bit more of a researcher, although I do believe I've been abducted. My kids have, they don't like to admit it, but they all have some really incredible experiences, alien beings of some sort. I mean, one of my oldest daughter, she would wake up at night and speaking completely different languages. She would talk about, hooded individuals at the end of her bed that would kind of communicate with her. My middle daughter, she tells a kind of a famous quick story in which she was very sick, stayed home from school. It was like middle school when we lived in Peachtree City, Georgia. And all of a sudden a small ball of light would come and completely scan her body. We can only assume it was checking to see if she was all right. My guess is they were, checking her out. And my other daughter, my youngest daughter, she talks very little bit about it, but she seems to shake her head up and down when she's listening to her other sisters talk about it. And my sisters had my older sister, she'd be my oldest sister because I have other sisters. Yeah. So anyway, she had out-of-body experiences when she was in Ireland. And she's a doctor, so we've done some pretty major research, abductee research in the Appalachian Mountains. And we both lived over in that corner of the country. And, I did the UFO forum in New Mexico, and we had guests from all over the world. And I worked for aerospace companies, did work for aerospace companies. Had the great privilege of talking to scientists and other engineers, et cetera, about the subject of UFOs, et cetera. So in all that, I've gained some pretty interesting knowledge of the field that I believe truly is connected. All this stuff that we talk about has connections to each other.
Absolutely. I think it's important to note one thing that you kind of said. My parents did not do this, which was speak with me about the paranormal and things like that. I think it is so important to do that with kids so they understand what they're going through. Because I know with my daughter, who's woken up just terrified, in the middle of the night, when beings are taking her, it was like I didn't have this frame of reference that I really had to develop for her. That was, not to scare her, but to give her enough information to understand what was happening and to not be afraid.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's, I'm wondering what your guys' experiences are with that, and how did you kind of teach your kids to be okay with it?
Well, on my end, because of my experiences, my parents thought I had religious visions because they were devout Catholics. And so they thought that I was having, because I would sleepwalk and I would wake up screaming and talking about all these scary things happening to me. And because of, I was very lucky because when I was 19, I kind of went into the medicine way. I started studying with medicine men and women. And so I got a better understanding of what was going on. And so when I had my daughter, I was able to create a foundation for her so that when she did wake up and was scared, I could talk to her and talk her through it and help her understand that it wasn't something necessarily to be afraid of, because I was there and I understood what was going on. So she said, "Mommy, there's someone outside my window wanting to play with me, or someone's in my closet," or she would ask me questions about aliens and things that I knew she didn't hear from anyone else, because I didn't really talk about that when she was very young. So I would explain things to her like it's just a matter of fact thing, so that she's grown up with it as a matter of fact thing, nothing big deal. And I think that if then she's kind of had a normal life, and if we can do that for our kids, that's great.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that, I did basically the same thing with my kids. I pretty much normalized it as much as humanly possible. But during my years of talking to people, there was a period of time, and when I lived in Georgia, where people would come to me and say, "Hey, listen, my kid had this boogeyman or something in the closet," or little people would come, wee people would come and talk to them, and they made it into a big deal. And I said, "No, go back." And a lot of times I was very angry with the parents. I said, "Go back to them, tell them it's all right, talk to them about it, kind of leave it at a very normal type situation, engage them with it. And if they want to go and talk to these little people or whatever's in the closet, let them do it. It's not a big deal." It really wasn't. And, a lot of them come back, "Well, thank you." The kids were all excited about it. And now it's kind of like, "Oh, well, it's not a big deal. I'm not scared. I'm not afraid of it anymore. The kids aren't afraid of it." And the parents kind of had a little better understanding. It was a little tough for the parents, but the kids it was really easy for generally. If you kind of keep it normal, if you're all freaked out, they're going to be freaked out too. So the important thing was not freak out, just relax. Nothing bad's going to happen. These little creatures have been around for a very, very long time. They're going to be around for a very long time, and they're really not here to hurt anybody. They're just not. That's not the case.
Well, I know for my daughter, I haven't worked with fairies before, but she has absolutely, she works with them often. And I know her father was very concerned because he worked them as a child as well, and he had some very frightening experiences. So he was speaking to her about it and got her very upset and riled up about it, and was like, "Listen, there is nothing to be afraid about," because she wasn't afraid before that conversation. So I really had to kind of go back and do damage control, because that's kind of what my parents with me very much wanted to make me afraid of it. Like, no, this is not something you want to go into. As well, I was from a Catholic background, and they just didn't understand it. And I think really because they haven't acknowledged it. That's my honest opinion. But I think we're finally getting to an age right now where we can speak about this openly with our children, and it's becoming more normal. So hopefully that's the way kind of things are going. But I want to ask you who or what introduced you to the kind of many worlds theory, and how did you guys learn about dimension jumping?
Oh gosh, well, the dimension jumping was something that as a child I learned. And so it had to do with the experience I had when I would go to sleep, and things that I was taught. And so I kind of was integrated into it from a very early age. So for me, as I got older, it was something more natural for me to do. And it was something that as time progressed, I just was also taught some things in the medicine way with a medicine man that I was married to, Thunderbow, and then with other medicine people who I was studying with. The Native Americans, actually, they call it walking in two worlds. And so in order for them to do their medicine and to heal people, they have to go different locations, see what different spirits are. If there's something happening to somebody because of this, just say, for instance, a curse or whatever, they think it's a curse, or somebody was really sick, they have to go into the body and see how to heal the body, but they go into the ethereal world to do it. So the very powerful medicine men and women that I studied with were able to walk into worlds on a daily basis. And so from that experience with them and being connected with them and learning from them, I learned how to do it.
There's so much wisdom from the tribal communities that it needs to be gleaned. I think that we have just, as a society, overlooked. I mean, there's so much infinite wisdom, and I really think that just connecting back to the earth is truly the answer for everybody to have their own discoveries. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
And what about yourself, Mike? What was your experience?
My connection was more from a research-based, portal jumping. My story I kind of tell is the Al Bielek story, which probably about 10 years ago I had and I'm sure there's a lot of people that do know who Al Bielek was or is. Well, he passed away. But Al was a guy, he was a scientist, he was quite a genius, PhD in physics, and he was the one that was involved with the Philadelphia experiment. So he has some vast wisdom. He's a very controversial figure. I mean, he talks about, being reincarnated and being here several times, and it goes on and on. I had an opportunity, a really fortunate opportunity by accident, basically, to interview him for about 5 hours. And we talked about everything. I mean, I could do probably several shows just on what Al Bielek says. But the point about it is he talked about that they would send them to jump rooms around the world. He told me at the time he thought there was like 13 of them. 2 of them were actually in New Mexico. One was at the Sandia Labs, actually Kirkland Air Force, but which is kind of the same thing in Albuquerque. But anyways, he said there was a jump room there, and there was another one in Los Alamos. And he said that he had actually did a portal jump several times to Mars and also to the moon, which they also have the jump room, the ending jump room. There's a beginning jump room that you jump into, a space you jump into, and then you're transported by that. And a lot of it had to do with mind too. He did talk about mind. I honestly don't remember all that part of that conversation, but it was he said that they taught you how to get into your mind, and then you were able to, with whatever they supplied you in the jump room, to make them move. And it was very quick, he said. As far as he knows, he doesn't even remember any kind of a time loss. He was just there. So anyways, that was really where my, my kind of dip in the water was on that. And I always thought it was really fascinating. And just having the interview with Al Bielek was absolutely incredible, because he did that in many ways. He did that when him and his brother jumped off the ship at the Philadelphia experiment and jumped into the water, because then the story goes, according to him, they ended up in Montauk, which is, again, a whole nother subject that I guess we can talk about, because Montauk is something that I have some pretty amazing information on in my own personal journey with Montauk.
Yeah, please do speak about that, because I think that's an amazing story that you have.
Speak about it now. You want me to talk about it now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. Well, I'm going to give you the abbreviated version. So it kind of all started out for me is a series of synchronicities. And this is very long, so I'm going to give you the abbreviated version. So I was up in Mount Shasta doing some meditation on Mount Shasta. Mm-hmm. And so there's some beings and some creatures in the mountain itself. And I made a somewhat of a connection there with them, but that really I don't think it had anything to do with Montauk at the time. It may not have, it just may have been coincidental. But I went into the little town, which is Mount Shasta. I think it's called Mount Shasta, I think it's called. And it's a beautiful, lovely little town right at the base of the mountain. And there's a bookstore there. And when I walked through it's a wonderful kind of metaphysical bookstore. I walked into the bookstore, and I literally will tell you, I've never had this happen before, but literally the book jumped off the shelf.
Mhm.
Book was the first in the series of, I think it's about 6 or 7 books. And I've read all the books, and I read a few extra ones that other people have written about Montauk. And the book was Montauk, I think it's, and I'm probably got the words a little messed up, but I think it's Montauk, the Adventures, Travels or something in Time. And it kind of tells the whole story of Montauk, etc. So I read a part of the book actually right there. And then I bought the book, took it home. At the time, lived in Tucson, Arizona. And I took it home and I read the rest of the book. And then from there, I read a couple other books, and I had a series, people that were in the book I ended up meeting, okay, which was really strange because most people at the time never, if you ask somebody, what about the Montauk, Project Montauk or Montauk Project, people would look at you, they didn't know what it was. But I ran into, in Tucson, I actually interviewed the daughter of one of the scientists that was also involved at Montauk and the Philadelphia experiment, also with Al Bulick. Just happened to, I don't want to say I ran into her, but I sort of just ran into her, and I like crazy. And then I moved to Albuquerque, and in Albuquerque, well, there was some other things. In Tucson, there was some experiences where I would go to the bookstore and buy the next book, and I walk out of the bookstore, and there was a huge UFO just sitting there. Now I had a lot of UFO experiences, but it twice happened buying books, which I thought was really odd. And then I moved to Albuquerque, and in Albuquerque, I met a person there, and I'm not going to name any names, a person there that actually interviewed or actually did hypnotherapy on what they call the Boys of Montauk. I don't know if you're familiar with it at all, Kristen, but these were the people that were sent on the time machine into the future. And they were a group of people. Some of them were homeless people from New York City. Some people were not homeless. Some people were just kind of elites that they grabbed and would put them on all young. They seem to be young men. Yeah, boys actually. That's why they call Montauk boys. Yep. And they would go there. Well, anyway, she had interviewed. She had actually hypnotherapy a series of these people, which was incredible. And she became a good friend of mine. And together we started the UFO Forum there in Paranormal UFO Forum in Albuquerque. But anyways, she also contacted, and she was the one that got Al Bulick and I together. And there was just a series of things that happened. And there was another gentleman there at this meeting that he was also part of Montauk too, that I got to meet. I didn't really talk to him that much, but I got to meet, and it was very strange. And then it even gets crazier. In fact, some of it.
Talk about Raven, the wolf.
Yeah.
No.
Go ahead. You can tell that part.
Enter in here that Michael and I both had met this wolf Raven, who was the ambassador for the Wild Wolf Sanctuary in New Mexico, and I can't remember what area, but the director was Leighton Cougar, and I met Leighton. So Michael had met Leighton ahead of time too, which was really interesting.
And we didn't know each other at the time.
We didn't know each other, but one thing about Raven is he would always bring people together, and there was an experience with Raven and then Bulick, right?
Well, yeah. Well, what happened was we're sitting there, and I'm talking to Al Bulick, and all of a sudden, we're all sitting there. We're all eating. We're eating in this living room. In a house. It's in a house. We're eating at this living. We have a little tables in front of us, and we're all eating dinner, and we're talking. And all of a sudden, I look up, and there's this huge freaking wolf. I mean, it was huge. And it was, and we're sitting at our little tables, and here's this wolf. I mean, it's way above us. It's huge.
Yeah,
it's
he's
like
a black-faced timber wolf is what he is.
And it was, this thing is walking, and it's smelling our food. And I don't know, nobody knows where this wolf came from. It's like it came from a portal. It's the craziest thing. So this wolf is walking through there, and it's smelling us, looking at us, and walking. We're all like petrified there looking. And it walks around the room, no problem, and walks out the door and walks out of the room. And then this
house. Wow.
So then Leighton Cougar comes in, the guy that's the handler, and he introduced, and it was all cool and everything, but it was really strange. because when you're in the presence of Al Bulick, you never knew what was going to happen. And the other thing that's so strange about this man, he's a narcoleptic. And so he is talking in the middle of these very intense comments, and he falls asleep on you. It's the craziest thing. And then all of a sudden, everybody else keeps on talking. He's sleeping there, and all of a sudden he wakes up and he continues the conversation. So we all turn our heads and listen to him for a few more minutes. And then he falls asleep, and we go talk to ourselves. And it's crazy. It was just, I mean, I get all excited just talking about it because it was so much fun. It was one of those experiences that you never expected would have happened on that particular day, because you just kind of, hey, somebody calls you up, come over and have a little meeting. We're having a movie crew over. We're talking about, holy crap, the whole thing is just incredible. So anyways, that was sort of how Rainbow and I met indirectly, weirdly, because at the time we didn't know each other.
Yeah, I was told about Michael, and then by Norio Hayakawa. And he's an amazing
That's
man.
another story.
It's another story, but he was one of the first people to go to Area 51, that kind of thing.
So
anyways, so I go to the meeting because I heard there was a dog whisperer that was going to be at this meeting, and so Noria wanted me to meet Michael too. And so I walk into the meeting, and I've had Leighton and Raven in my house because I actually did a photo shoot with Raven at the sanctuary. And so I walk in, there's Raven, there's Leighton, and I'm like, what are you doing here? Because he's a wolf whisperer. I mean, this man is amazing. And he goes, I'm talking. And I'm like, they said there was a dog whisperer going to be talking here. And he's like, no, it's me. And so I knew Leighton, and Raven came over to me, and then we were just hanging. And then that's how I met Michael. But I mean, you just would not expect to have all these synchronicities between all of this. And I believe that there was some stories that Leighton had to say actually about that was similar to Al Bulick in a way too. I mean, I can't speak for him, but it was just, everything's connected in so many different ways. And it's just like, and that's how I met Michael. And it's just like, I used to hang out with this wolf and Leighton, and it was just amazing.
I've also had just real quick to throw in there, I've also had a pretty amazing wolf experience with my ex-husband and my daughter and his kids. A wolf, we were driving from California to Utah for a vacation, and we were, I think, just getting into Utah, and a wolf came out of the mountains down to the car and was just staring at me. And we're at this gas station, and people were like freaking out, like, what are they doing? They never come down, from the mountains. Like, this is absolutely nuts. And I got some video of it as well, and it was pretty amazing. It was just staring at me, and it was at that point, like, I got some memories, from my past experiences with wolves, but that I didn't recall until that moment. But it was a pretty beautiful experience as well.
No,
when they connect with you, it's like, it's amazing. Yeah,
it really is. So it keeps on going. So anyways, years later, I get a call from an old friend in Atlanta. I used to help a person that did the UFO forum in Atlanta. And she was an amazing person. She did all kinds of really interesting things all her life. But anyways, come to find out, she, doesn't know much about me because it's many years have passed. And she tells me, she says, you know a guy named Duncan Cameron Duncan, I think his name is Cameron Duncan. Yeah, Cameron Duncan. Anyways, he turns out to be Al Bulick's stepbrother. Stepbrother, that's correct. And he was also on the ship, the Philadelphia experiment. And she ended up dating him, and which is so bizarre.
Yeah.
Here's another synchronicity. Here's an old friend that ends up dating the other part of this equation. And both of them, and she said, he told her all these same stories, how they were on the ship, how they jumped overboard, and they ended up in this portal, and this portal took them to Montauk. And he talked about his time when he was in the time machine. Now, the brother, Cameron Duncan, he was actually the one of the people that actually went on the time machine. It was so many thousands of years. I think it was like 5,000 years in the future. And he was the one that saw, there was a statue. And if you read the books, if you're familiar with it, there was a statue. It was like a golden statue. It was like a horse, I don't want to say a Trojan horse, but they made it look like it in the book. And that was the thing, that was the trigger, that if you got to that horse, somehow they could determine that you had gone 5,000 years into the future. And that was the key thing. And apparently he had seen it. Most of them never got that far. By the way, some of the people that got in the time machine, some of those people, they never came back. They never came back.
Explain what happened with one of the gentlemen actually became part of the ship.
Oh, well, he was a Navy crew member. Yes, I didn't tell you that. That was supposedly one of Al Bulick's, and that would have been Duncan Cameron's relative. I don't know what, if it was a cousin or what it was, but they actually got embedded. What happened was apparently they got embedded in the ship when the ship materialized again, because it dematerialized, then it moved around a little bit apparently, or something. They did something and it materialized. He was embedded in the ship, and he died. He died. I don't know exactly what they did, if they had to cut him out. I guess they had to, I mean, as gross as that sounds, they would have had to cut him out, cut him out of the ship. And he apparently, Al said he died. That was it. That's all he said.
They have interviews of people who saw some of this happen when the ship rematerialized, and just like screaming because it was just something so out there, like that he was a part of the actual fibers of the ship. There was no way to save him, and it was just something so traumatic.
What is that they had a feeling, him and his brother had this feeling things were going badly wrong, and they didn't. He said, we didn't know what to do exactly, but we couldn't fix it, and all we thought of is to jump overboard. And that's what he did. He said he never, as far as he knows, he never hit the water. He just was gone. And it had something to do with this field that was projected, this kind of a Tesla type field around the ship that was projected. And once he kind of broke through that, he was gone. He moved somewheres, which turned out for him, ended up on the floor in Montauk, in the Army base in Montauk. And then, then they were like all freaked out because they didn't know how he got there, and et cetera, et cetera.
Wow, that's just an amazing story. I mean, for those that kind of think these concepts are so out there and that the government has no idea about things like this is really kind of, this shows you how not foreign concepts they are, and how they very much understand some of these things, and that they've experimented with them. And I still feel like our generation doesn't really know about what happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you actually jumped, either one of you jumped yourself before?
I have not. I mean, I have, I talked about, sometimes I talk about, the other thing I kind of talk about a little bit is the Merkaba thing. And I know that you can travel using the Merkaba. I don't want to discuss exactly how, but again, like all this stuff, it's kind of dangerous unless you really know what you're doing, because you could end up someplace you don't want to be and you can't get back. So
like the gentleman in the ship,
sort of like the gentleman in the ship. Sure, absolutely.
Well, and you don't know the rules and the guidelines to another dimension or location.
Right, exactly.
So when you are in the process of doing something like that, you have to take into consideration that, if you look at the Carlos Castaneda concept, that there's 48 laws to this reality, then you have to figure that wherever you're going may be similar but different. And so if that's the case, there's no preparation for that. So it's not something that you take lightly, and it's something that is not easy to process through. I think you have to have a certain kind of balance in yourself to be able to do something like that. And it's not something that you do overnight. It's something that you have to learn how to do. And that's something that makes all of this very dangerous.
Yeah, it's actually very, very dangerous. And speaking on that concept, I wanted to ask you guys about, have you seen the Randonautica app, and have you had any experiences with it, heard about it? Because I wrote a research paper on this. I actually think they are messing with the timelines through this app and tracking people. And I think it's very dangerous, because during the quarantine, many kids were experimenting with this randonauting, and didn't know what they were getting into, and manifested a dead body in a suitcase. And many other people did similar things like this. A woman ended up getting raped by trying to put herself in a spooky experience. That was her intention, and ended up, what the universe deems as spooky, or you're inviting that into your timeline, and people don't really understand how that works. But yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, the Renonautica, I watched a couple of video channels on YouTube with people who do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same concept for me with the Ouija board, because what you're doing is you're intending something that you don't understand. And if you're not experienced, or you're not, like, if you're not aware of the dangers of what you're trying to intend, if you're not willing to be responsible for that, which most people think it's a game.
Yes.
They think Ranonautica is a game. This is something to do, because I was bored, or they were bored, or whoever was bored. And then when you intend the paranormal, there is always something waiting to answer back. There's always something looking at you. And with intention, what you're doing is it's kind of like a timeline thing. It's actually it could be considered jumping in a way, because you're intending something in the future, and you're getting all these coordinates and these directions to go to this location. So there's a possibility that these people are being directed to portals, whether they're natural or artificial, we don't know. And then when you intend, there's a lot that goes into that. So, and then once you intend it, it's there.
Yeah.
You create something exists now in the way that you've intended it. So people have to be responsible for what they do. And then when this happens to them, as I'm sure you've seen, if you've seen any of the videos, they get all scared and freaked out, and they want to figure out, oh, how do I get out of this? And the problem is that anybody can track them, whether it's something paranormal or not, or just some crazy person tracking them. And then you're giving them all this information and basing it on your location. So if somebody wants to hack in and figure out where you are, and that's what some of them are experiencing right now. There's a couple of channels I follow where they've been hacked into. They've had to get new phone numbers multiple times. They had to get different vehicles, and all of that just to produce these shows for entertainment. And it's not really the kind of entertainment that I think is healthy.
No, nor do I think kids, they're marketing it to kids, like under 18 types, 16, 15, 16 years of age, like that's just extremely irresponsible from my point of view. I just don't think that kids at that age most kids do not have an understanding of what that entails and what can happen to you. And like you were saying, Rainbow, they want to just get out of it after they experience something like that, and that's not really how it works. You have to have sufficient knowledge of what you're doing before you ever do these things, and it's incredibly irresponsible not to.
Well, it's the thrill factor. They just want to have, it's the funhouse factor. They want to go in and be scared, but what they don't understand, it's not a movie and it's not a funhouse. It's reality, and they're creating that reality, and they don't understand that. So they're creating an intention of something really maybe scary and horrible happening to them. And then they don't have the tools or the know-how to get out of the situation. And not in every case, do they come out of it unscathed. And I just don't think it's a good thing. I just think that it's like the Slender Man phenomena, where this mass kind of thought process went in and created this scary guy, and a lot of kids started seeing this scary guy. And so Randonautica can do the same thing, where it can just bring about like some type of weird frequency or energy that can actually exist off of that, because so many people are putting their intention on it.
Absolutely. What are your thoughts, Mike?
Well, my thoughts are this: it kind of just proves a point how powerful we are as beings. We are very powerful beings. And especially collectively, we can get a group of people together and meditate on something, etc. We are very, very powerful. And if people don't realize that, obviously, strange stuff happens. And it isn't always good. There's many good things, you can meditate. A group of people can meditate for very good things, and it will create a good situation. but it works the opposite way too. I mean, my only experience in this would be back to the Ouija board. Again, I in my many years of talking to people, there was many experiences where people used it. They would ask me about Ouija boards, and of course I was completely against them because I know the danger of them. And there was one I remember now when I lived in Tucson, this couple came to me and said, listen, we were playing with a Ouija board last night, and my I think it was a sister, they thought it was really a lot of fun, and they were having a lot of fun, and suddenly something very dark came and actually attached to one of them. And they were asking me how to get this person fixed or unattached. And I said, honestly, I don't really know. I wish you wouldn't have done that. You know, you need to take that Ouija board out and bury it and maybe get somebody to do a ceremony over it.
Yeah.
But I think finally what happened is I did hook them up or get them in touch with a shaman that I believe helped them, her, because it was serious. I mean, she was really had lost her mind.
Yeah.
Temporary, at least. I was hoping it was temporary. I kind of lost touch with the people, but man, she was in a bad place. And I know it had to do with that Ouija board. I really do.
There are so many instances where people actually have that where I've experienced where people have come in and asked me to help them, where there's that attachment.
Mm-hmm.
And then my place as a medicine woman is to go in and I have to deal with this entity or whatever this thing is. And it's just like a dark mass of energy, or sometimes it's a hostile human spirit. And other times it's something else that's even scarier. Yeah. So what people need to understand is that and it's just the way that I feel about it is the Ouija board is kind of like scrying as well, because you can look in a mirror or you can look in water. I mean, and that's how they did it in the old days, you know, and the Egyptians actually did a lot of scrying in water, but the Ouija board isn't really any different. The Victorians made it into a game, but you're basically looking into the unknown and asking questions, and anything can actually answer you back. And the difference between someone who's an amateur or just doing it for fun is that they don't understand that in the old days, when priests and priestesses would actually go in and do this kind of thing, they knew exactly who they were directing their intention to. The goddess Isis, protection, or whoever. Yeah, they knew, and so there's a difference here when you know, and then whatever's going to respond back knows that who they're dealing with kind of gets what's going on here. They're not just open to anything. And so how you ask and how you actually go into ceremony and how you close out the ceremony says a lot about who you are. And so just willy-nilly playing around with this stuff, and some people don't even know that once you open up a portal or a doorway through a Ouija board or through this Randonautica, because you can do that as well with your intention, then what happens that is open forever. And whatever this thing is always going to be here for somebody else like us to deal with. Yeah. So if I have to get rid of something that somebody brought in, maybe, 5 Ouija board games ahead, 5 days ago or whatever, then this thing, if I don't take care of it, it's going to be out there for somebody else to deal with. Yeah. So they have to understand that.
Yeah, it has to be closed. Once you open this thing up, you got to close it. You got to find a ceremony to close it, or somebody else will, or somebody's going to deal with some craziness.
Yeah.
And then you don't want to deal with that kind of craziness. It's normally not good.
Yeah. Let's switch gears a little bit. I know both of you have worked with Sasquatch, and I know that's a really amazing topic I haven't gone into before.
Yes, we have.
I haven't really had anybody experience that. So can you talk a little bit about your experiences and kind of what you guys have gleaned from that?
Well, I brought something with me that I thought you might find interesting. Is I was actually communicate. I had a Oregonian Sasquatch communicate with me, and he reached out to me. I got very lucky. And so I drew a picture of him. His name is Loki. And I brought it with me. Loki is very special to me because he's a portal jumper. And he told me that there's different groups of Sasquatch, and that's what his group does. He's about 8 to 9 feet. He said that's a little short for Sasquatch because they can be up as 14 to 15 feet,
Right.
even higher.
Right.
But this is him. And I'm gonna try to do this. I don't know.
Oh,
Can you
wow.
see that?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Oh my
trying to
Yeah, and
do
if you move it, it really looks kind of
I'm sorry. I'm trying not to get the glare. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
See
That's
that?
Loki.
Wow. Yeah. Like that's such a beautiful drawing. Like you see the eyes, like the compassion in his eyes, and very much. Yeah. All right.
Rainbow draws a lot of entities. There's many entities that she has contact with. She can draw them, and some of them are absolutely incredible. It's just amazing.
Yeah, I try to draw the entities so people can kind of see what they
Right,
look like.
right.
So,
And feel them too.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely got the feeling off of that. That's. I mean, that's.
Yeah. So Loki was Loki would come to me and he would give me information 2 or 3 times in a night, sometimes 2 o'clock in the morning, sometime, and he would just, and it would be stuff that I'd have to get a notebook and I'd have to write all this stuff down.
Mhm.
And eventually I just told him, I said, this is exhausting. I'm a human. I'm not like you. Maybe I don't, so he basically gave me a lot of information about portals.
Mhm.
And I actually did an article for Paranormal Underground, and it kind of explained what he was telling me about the portals. And he was telling me that there's natural portals and there's artificial portals. And then there's another type of portal called the traveling ghost.
Okay.
And these are portals that are entities. And there's I think 2 or 3 on the planet that have been here a long time. They came from another planet.
Mhm.
And these are the ones that kind of, they have like a weather element to them. And I actually experienced a traveling ghost vortex when I was working cattle in my 20s. And we could feel all of this electric energy in the air. And I actually smelled blood in my nose. And I thought I had a bloody nose all the time. And so did all the other cowboys. It was just that electric. And the cattle, we were dealing with Mexican steers, and they were going nuts in the corrals because we were going to take them over to another pasture because they were getting ready to do a full roundup. And anyways, we had a stampede because the cattle were so scared. And so we all had to book it out there. And it took about 2 hours for us to get the cattle back and calm down. But I realized that at this point that I was off balance. And so I was like really feeling for my horse as she was galloping, because we just had to try to herd the cattle in and close them off. And it was just like a fun house experience. And you could feel something over you, sometimes behind you, sometimes to the side of you, and sometimes underneath you. So you would really lose your balance. And I noticed that my horse was kind of standing and walking and moving around like she was drunk.
Yeah.
And so, and being on her, I was so off balance. And so by the time it was all said and done, the cowboys said they'd never experienced anything like that. And Loki told me that that was a time in my life where a traveling ghost actually went by. And so it alters your time and space and everything. So it stretches everything out. And that's what portals do. When you actually are around a portal, it can stretch out time and space. Colors are stretched, and then you get that funhouse feeling. You get really dizzy. You don't feel really good. You have to sit down, that kind of thing. And that's what happened to us when we were actually working cattle. So that was very interesting. But he gave me some interesting ideas about portals. And then I met another Sasquatch here in Oregon named Warsha. And Warsha is actually from a tribe that actually they're born here. Loki's group, they're dimensional. So they can be visible, they can do all kinds of stuff. Warsha's not that way. They're born here. They're the Sasquatch that a lot of us probably see, who are just living. And they have a summer camp and a winter camp. And Michael and I used to give her apples and dark chocolate and stuff because she really likes dark chocolate. And so she gifted us this wreath. We found it, and actually Michael's the one that saw it.
Yeah, it was very high up in the tree. I mean, I don't know how we would have got there without being a Sasquatch. And this Sasquatch would have been pretty tall because the arm length, I had to get a very long stick, probably a 10-foot
Yeah.
stick. I just
Yeah.
got lucky to
Here
get
it
it
is.
out of the tree. So it was way, way up.
Wow.
It's beautiful. It's
Oh, there
absolutely
we go.
beautiful. And it was just hanging there way up in this tree. And I pulled it down. And it was just great. It was just great. So it hangs in our house and we
Yeah.
feel the energy.
Mike, you've also had an experience where you were touched on the shoulder by a Sasquatch, right?
Yeah, yeah. So my dear friend who is still around doing his amazing research, Kiwani Lapsaritis. We were out doing our little, I always call them mini expeditions because we didn't leave the country or anything, but it was way out in the eastern part of Washington State. And we were closer or right on the border of a Native American reservation out there. And so we were in our tent, it was night. We had some kind of minor experiences. We were there for several days. I would say minor experiences where I could talk about, but let me go right to the meat of it. So we're there, and it was kind of I think it was kind of a moonlit night because the tent was kind of lit up a little bit. And so Kiwani was across from me. You could see him laying there, and he was snoring. So I know he was there. He wasn't outside of the tent. And then I was laying over here, just kind of listening to him snore and try to get to sleep, I guess. And suddenly I'm laying there, and through the tent, I mean, literally through the tent, and they're dimensional. They can do things like go through walls and then go through tents and whatever. A hand reached in, and it was huge because I could see it. I don't want to say that I could turn my head enough to see it on my shoulder, and it was a huge hand. It was all hairy, and it was a Sasquatch. There's no doubt. It laid there. It seemed like forever. I'm sure it was only maybe 20, 30 seconds, and then pulled it back. And so that was my being touched by a Sasquatch story. The next day, we were going to eat breakfast. Kiwani, I didn't say anything to him at first, and then I said, oh, then he said something because I was asking. I had gone on trips with him before, and besides, we did see a lot of footprints, and we went into vortexes. We had some really wonderful vortex experiences, but I never saw anything. I never visually saw anything. I actually later on, I did get a photo, a long shot photo of it, which is on our website, but I never really saw anything. So I said, listen, give me the sign. Let me have something a little closer in. And sure enough, he communicates with him, and sure enough, this happened, and it was undeniable. It was undeniable. So he confessed a little bit. He said, I talked to him, I asked him to do something. He said he didn't know what they were going to do, but he wasn't surprised that something like that happened. So anyways,
wow.
that's
and Rainbow, you communicate telepathically with Loki and with Warsaw, right?
Yes. Yeah. They both. Loki actually first made contact with me when I was in the shower, which was very uncomfortable. But the water is a conduit, so of course it was obvious why that he was able to come through. And then what was really interesting with that is there was a lot of bangs and loud noises, so loud, and like, I'm not gonna say like bombs going off, like somebody crashed into something like a car.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember turning the water off a couple of times and looking out the window because I thought, oh God, there was a crash outside, but there wasn't. And the house shook a little bit, but I was like, what is going on here? And then that's when Loki came in. He said, he introduced himself, and he said he was a Sasquatch. And I'm like looking around going, oh my God. I'm like, who is this? So but then he actually came into Michael's his daughter's house when I was here.
Mm-hmm.
And he showed himself to me, and he was in the doorway, and he's crouching down a little bit. And so I did actually get to see him and spent quite a few hours talking with him. And that was
I was
really
sleeping
cool.
right next to her. So I wasn't really aware of anything, but this big Sasquatch was right in our room. So it was pretty incredible.
And I was really scared. I mean, I'm not gonna say that I wasn't. I mean, just because I've experienced the paranormal all my life doesn't mean when things actually happen, I don't get scared. And I'm like, I had the covers going, oh my God, but then he calmed me down. He's a lovely Sasquatch. He's pretty amazing. He's very stern with me though. He told me that I was very scattered and that I needed to kind of pull myself in and really kind of I guess do more meditation or refocus myself, he said, because as a human, I was very scattered, and I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. And Marsha's much more, she's very female, very compassionate. Not that he's not, but she's just very loving, and then just, she wants to make sure I'm okay. And I was very concerned about her when we had the fires here.
Yeah.
We had really horrific fires last year, and we were actually evacuated for 4 days from our home. And so I know that all the fires affect Sasquatch, because they have to then move to new locations, and that's not always easy, but it was pretty scary for all of us.
Yeah.
But I think she's fine. We actually did try to go to the location where we were doing a lot of our research, and we're not going to be allowed to go out that direction for another year. They've had the highway closed for a year.
And there's no way to really get around that because it's really closed.
I have a question. What really is going to happen to most of the Sasquatch with them cutting down the forests and really kind of, just moving more people in that area? Did you ever ask?
Well, the interesting thing about that's a good question. I think there's plenty of forest, to be honest with you. I mean, they can move to different places, but the interesting thing about Sasquatch, especially the ones that are dimensional, and they seem to be everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I had friends, and Kiwani was an example. When he lived in Tucson, that's where I met him in Tucson. He talked about, in his house in the city of Tucson, it materialized right in there. I don't think there's an issue per se. I mean, I think most of them love being in forested areas because they're isolated. They love the forest. I think there's a concentration there, but that doesn't mean they don't pop up and anywhere else. It's just like any alien or anything else. They'll pop up in the middle of New York City,
Well, there's a connection with Sasquatch and humans. I mean, we're very connected to each other. So I don't think that, just my feeling on it, that Sasquatch minds people coming in. I think that what they mind is their intention. And they don't want to be harmed any more than we want to be harmed. They want to be left alone just like we do. There shouldn't be any research done on Sasquatch body. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that at all.
That's absolutely horrible.
Would any human, I mean, would we want another alien species coming here and saying, oh, let's take humans and experiment on them? Well, we know that that's been going on, and we don't like it one bit. So why would we do to somebody, another being, what we don't want done to us, but is done? I mean, why not just break that chain and just allow them to be who they are? And I think they would come around to more people if they understood that they're not going to hurt them. But if you have researchers and Sasquatch hunters who are going out there and wanting to find them
and whatnot, they're
not going to appear, and they're not going to come around, and they can be involved for a lifetime, and they will never see a Sasquatch because they're not going to come around that kind of mindset.
That's a very, very important point, I think, to note, is that you're right. These people will not ever, that's their intention, is to have a Sasquatch experience. Well, you might want to work on doing some inner work and understanding what you're trying to achieve, because you're never going to get lucky and experience something as beautiful as you guys have. I haven't myself experienced that yet, but I can see from both of your faces that it's been a very beautiful relationship that you've been able to develop with them.
Yes. Yeah, and all has to do with respect. I think respect is really important.
Yeah,
so
I definitely would agree. Let's kind of switch again, if you don't mind, and let's speak a little bit about your experiences with the black-eyed children, because I know this is something I often get people asking about, and I haven't really run into anybody that's had any experiences. So if you could talk about that a little bit and what.
Well, I don't allow them to come to our house.
For good reason.
You're not coming to my house, but David Weatherly did a really good book on the black-eyed children. And so that's pretty phenomenal. But I have looked into them because I think there's a correlation or a connection to them and the Men in Black. And that's and the men and women in black. There's women in black too. So I think there's a connection between the two. Now, the one thing that I find very interesting about the black-eyed kids is that they have to be invited in like a vampire. So I find that connection between the vampirism and black-eyed children is really interesting. I mean, it's almost like they're barred. I mean, like, until you say, yes, you can come into my house, they can't come in. Literally, they cannot come in. And so the people who've actually experienced the black-eyed children have this deep core fear of, the foreboding kind, the fight or flight kind of energy and experience, where you're like going, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? And sometimes these kids can get into their minds and actually let them in, and then these people get very sick. These people can't remember, their mind's blocked. Yeah. And then all of a sudden the doors open, they come to, the doors open and the kids are gone. And then they have ill health, their animals end up dying, and they have strange things happening to them after that.
Do you think the rainbow, that they're just interdimensional beings? What do you think their agenda really is with humans?
I think they're energy vampires, and but I also think that they're kind of like a trickster. Mm-hmm. I think there's something else connected to them, and I think they're a byproduct of some other type of entity that is made them more human-like, mm-hmm. so that they can kind of come into society and not like attract a lot of attention. The only way that people know they're not normal is by their black eyes. They're completely black, and they try to hide their eyes. So I think that it's nefarious, because I think that I don't even, I could understand if it's like an energy vampire, just come and suck your energy away and you get really tired and you're like, oh my God, this feels terrible. But there's people who get horrifically sick, and some people really dangerously sick. Animals die. So I'm not understanding, and that's part of our research, as to why bad things happen to people after they're in contact with the black-eyed kids, and some of them who let them in. That's the big question here, is I'm trying to figure out what really they are, because I think we can say, yeah, energy vampire, but there's something more sinister about them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe it'd be important to ask, like, intergenerationally, like, what's happening to the kid? Are they able to have children? Like, is there something that they're corrupting from us or taking from us the ability to procreate, things like that, and to see what's passed down, if there's any of these, I guess, concepts or sicknesses and things like that are passed down. Is it something that's corrupting our DNA? I think those are all really interesting areas that we need to research a bit more.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely.
But you guys have actually met people who have let them in, is that correct?
Well, I mean, in my case, and this is kind of more of a local thing that happened recently, on one of the, the neighborhood website, I don't remember what they call them, Nextdoor or something like that, where a group of people get together. They're all over the country, I think. But anyways, all of a sudden there was this thing that appeared. It was like, I'm sure that 99.9% of the people didn't know what it was. Yeah. We're talking about this group of children. It was small kids. It was just weird. And it would come at like dark, like 9 o'clock at night. And they were trying to sell somebody on getting into their house and cleaning their carpet with Dawn soap. They had a bottle of Dawn soap, and they said, this stuff will really clean your carpet. We have to get in, and we have to get in. It was really, excuse me, it was really like bizarre, because they were very aggressive. At first, they started out non-aggressive, which is very typical. They're very nice at, oh, we got to come in for some reason. Now, this particular reason was this Dawn soap deal, which was so funny. And the people said there were several people that responded, and they all had the same thing. They said it was so bizarre because they had this bottle of Dawn soap, and it was like, are you kidding me? You want to come in my house? They're thinking this.
Yeah.
My house and do that. Now, they did say they look strange. Now, they didn't say they had the black eyes. They didn't say that. I think one did say that they just look weird in their dress. and they look a little strange. And that's all they said. But I know dang well these were black-eyed children. I really did. Now, they did it at night. So, if it was dark, if the light at the porch was not real bright, they're not going to see those dark eyes, right? They could hear their voices, but they couldn't see their eyes. So maybe that's another reason it happens. Yeah. But they also said, why did they come at, forgetting about all this other stuff? It was dark, 9 o'clock, and they want to come in our house. And they were very aggressive. Several of them, I think, well, out of 2 of them, I think one talked to them for a while. And almost that person said, I almost let him in. And I don't even know why I almost let him in, because it was so ridiculous of a story, but they were very persistent. I remember saying it was very persistent. And then they remember the one guy said something about them walking back, and there was a car there waiting for them. And they jumped in the car and they were gone, and they never saw him again. But, I knew in my heart what was going on, but I really, I try to individually contact those people, but they never would. And maybe I told them too much. That was maybe my problem, because I sent them an email or through this next door thing. And I said, I'm a researcher. This was kind of interesting, these kids that came to your door, and I probably spooked them. So I didn't get a chance to, which is unfortunate. I mean, if it would have been a neighbor or somebody that came to me and told me the story, well, it's different. You kind of know who this person is, that relationship. Because one of the things I find out is that all my years of doing research, and I've been in the logistics field and et cetera, it seems like whenever you build your relationship up with people, that's when they start telling you things of their past. And what I found out over all my years, most everybody that I have personally come in contact, if I sit with them and talk to them, they all had some experiences of some sort. Now, that doesn't mean alien. It may be aliens. It could be black-eyed children. It could be men in black. It could be we people. I can go on. Angels, fairies. Something has always touched them in some way. And most people have this story. That's why this is so fascinating to be able to come out and talk about it, because there's people out there, I guarantee you, almost everybody, that could say, just sit there and think about it, or think about those. I always call it the vivid memories. Vivid memories are so important, and they can be the silliest vivid memory, but it is an indicator that you've had an experience of some sort.
Absolutely. And speaking about experiences, both of you have had ET experiences. Can you speak about them a little bit?
Well, I had them from the time I was a child. It just seemed natural. I had experiences with other children. I went to a Catholic school when I was for the first grade. And I remember being bussed out in a light blue, with a light blue bus, and probably about 6 other kids with me. And just going off and doing stuff. And I also remember working with the grays and learning how to levitate. That was interesting. I remember them training me and teaching me things. A lot of it is blocked out. I don't remember like in detail. I remember a mantid, being in a classroom with a mantid with a bunch of other kids. And they're very stern, and I don't, they're
praying
more,
mantis.
but we call them mantids.
Mantids.
And so probably about 6 or 7 other kids were always with me, and boys and girls. And then I have a very vivid memory that kind of came back to me when I was 40 years old, being on the west side of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and seeing quite a few, probably 3 or 4 big UFOs, crafts that were on the ground, and a lot of children being lined up and being taken into these crafts. And I remember thinking we were going to go for a ride, at the fairgrounds. And a mantid was in front of me, and he said, "No, the children are being taken. They're not coming back." And I remember I froze, and I was in terror that they were going to pick me and take me, and they didn't. But there was a little boy who was a couple of years older than me, who I had a little crush on, and they actually did pick him to go. And I was it was horrible because I thought, oh my God, he's not coming back. And he was excited. He thought he was going to go. And I maybe he thought he was going to come back. But from what this man had told me, the kids weren't coming back. And they took a lot of kids that day. And so I've since that time of that memory coming back to me, I've been looking to talk to people who might have had the same memory. And when I went to Michael's group, when I was actually invited to talk, a woman actually got in contact with me from that particular I guess lecture that I did, and she remembered it. So I was able to find one person who had the same memory as me of being over there and her fear of being taken. And so we kind of talked about our memories, but she's the only one that I've had contact with who actually was there. I don't know about anybody else.
What happened to the kids? Did they just disappear? I mean, what became of that?
Well, I think this is where genetics comes into play. I think they were taking the children, and I think that for the ones that they kept, they created like doppelgangers from them and maybe sent them back. But it was all about the genetics. I just remember this man saying these particular children that they were taking had something different about them that attracted them to these children that they needed. It was something that was needed. And that's just, at this point, that's all I can remember.
Wow. So yeah, and they're probably creating, I mean, you think about the timing, there's so many hybrids on planet right now on the Earth that don't really know, I mean, that's quite possible that that's what they were doing, is creating the hybrids.
Well, I think I'm a hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of can relate to that. But what I think they were doing with these children was something really even further than that. They were something from these children they needed. And so they were, and I can't even guess what happened to the kids, but I do know that the children who were being taken were not coming back. I don't think that, I think the mantis that told me this because it knew that I wasn't being taken. Yeah. Because I was traumatized after that. Every time I went to the West Side for a softball game or anything, it was really sad. I would pee on myself, just like a scared puppy dog, because I would have this memory would all of a sudden come back and hit. And then I would be walking around and all of a sudden my sisters would go, why didn't you just tell us you needed to use the bathroom? And I'd be going, oh, I don't know. But it was just that fear factor where I just couldn't contain. I had a fear of being taken away, being abducted when I was very, very young. And it had to do with a lot of this stuff that happened. So with the experiences that I had, and I'll let Michael talk now, a lot of it was fear-based as well. And then from a very young age too, I dealt with the men in black, but they did some training with me, which is you don't really hear about that very often, but they did do some training with me. And so I don't really view them in that scared way. I just view them as like, oh God, my teachers are back, that kind of thing.
Interesting.
So my experience, I've had some experiences. Some of them I'm sure that I can't remember, but I believe I can feel they're there. Mm-hmm. I did have one I remember is kind of a more of a vivid memory that I've talked about before. I was, I've been doing this research since I was, like a teenager, basically. Initially was really just reading a lot, and then I started doing in-field research. So I've been kind of involved for a very long time, and probably in my 30s, I lived in Georgia, and I remember having a thought in my mind. And the thought, I'm not even going to repeat the thought. I really don't want to, because it apparently got me in trouble. But I can kind of tell you, it was a real basic, weird thought. And it's just, anybody could think this thought, but apparently when you think it, it's again a kind of a creation thing. And I guess I don't know what I was thinking. It was, I'll tell you, it's related to religion. It was some kind of a religious thought.
Okay.
And I thought about it, and apparently I wasn't supposed to understand this truth about life. And because of that, I was in my house, and suddenly I had this terrible feeling that something was coming for me. So I went outside. Something drew me outside. So I went outside, and in the backyard, I'll never forget this, there were 3 alien beings. And I think one was, looked to me, if I can remember correctly, was kind of a gray.
Mhm.
And the other one was definitely a reptilian, a very large, aggressive, horrible looking reptilian. And maybe the other one was an insectoid. I'm not sure, but there were, whatever it was, except for the gray. The gray was not that scary. The other 2 were very
Not good. Yeah.
They were challenging me because they either want to scare the hell out of me, so I never would think this thought again. I don't know. But I don't know. I think I was just a very fearless person. I always have been in many ways. And I just challenged them. I said, go ahead, do what you got to do. But that's what I believe in. And it was, whatever it was just strange that
And
they
the
would
thing
be.
is, they can't really do much to you when you come from that frame of
I mean,
mind.
the worst they could do is kill me. And you know what? I'm not afraid of dying. So
Yeah,
it wasn't a big deal. So once I took that away from me, they just vanished.
Yeah.
It was just like, I had this ability and power, because one of the things I've always known, and I came to know over the years, is that fear is absolutely the worst thing with some of these beings, especially the reptilians, because that's what they feed off of. And if you take that away, they have nothing. So
Yeah, they're
you
not
have to be
interested anymore.
fearless. If you are fearless now, I'm not saying all of them are on this fear thing, but many of them use the fear that as their energy source. And that's why I believe, and that's why there was this thing called Monsters, Inc., the whole movie thing, that my name is based.
Explain that, because I love the story. I was cracking up the other day, like, just too amazing.
So yeah, it's another one of these crazy stories about my life. So I guess it was probably about 15 years before the movie Monsters, Inc. came out. Okay. So I wrote this, I wrote a little article. It wasn't much of anything, but it was an article, maybe 1 page, about why I felt, somebody had just asked me a question, why do you feel aliens are here? And so I've been thinking about this for years, and I said, oh, well, I'll write it and I'll send it to you, and you can post it on your little site, which I don't even remember the name of the site because it's been so many years ago. And so I basically, the story was, what I wrote about was this whole thing about the fear, and that the aliens were here to collect this energy that we gave up. Then the energy could come from things like being afraid, emotional energy, even happiness, any type of energy, sexual energy, all different types of energies that humans are quite unique produce. And what I thought about was, you know what? If these aliens are here and among us, they could be creating wars. They could be creating all this stuff that has this extremely intense energy, right?
Yeah.
So you have even more of this stuff to collect. So they're here collecting as much as they can. And if you remember in the movie Monsters, that's what they do. They ended up having these little cylinders that they suck this kid screaming and all kinds of stuff. They suck it and they keep it, and then they use it for whatever they use it for, right?
As
So
power,
that's what
cool, yeah.
I probably wouldn't have thought too much more about it, even if the movie came out, or the movie did come out, of course. But then when my name was there, and my name basically is the main character, and is said more than any other name in any other movie ever made. It was so weird. I mean, I just couldn't believe it. The synchronicity was way crazy over the top. Then on top of it, the story continues, which I already told you, is that I worked for the Olympics in a couple different places. But the first place I worked for, I befriended a bunch of people from Europe. The second place, which was in Utah, I did that Olympics. And those people in Europe who weren't really at the games at the time, the second time, they'd come to one and then they go back to Europe. They would send me these little packages with the little Mike Wazowski dolls in it. And I didn't know at first I was getting these dolls, and I didn't know what the hell they were sending me the dolls for. The one on doll. And come to find out, Kristen, come to find out, the movie released in Europe first. And they saw it, and they saw my name, and they got all excited. Oh my God, I know this guy, right? And so they didn't know the background story at all. And that made me even more crazy. So they get these dolls, and I'm looking, I don't know what the heck they are, but somebody sent me a freaking doll. I don't know. I'm putting it aside. I got 3 of these things. Finally, I decided, I got to call somebody. So I finally got a hold of one of the guys. In fact, I think that one of the guys ended up coming to the games in Salt Lake City later on. He was kind of a latecomer at the game. So he was doing some work there, doing something. And he says, oh yeah, did you get my doll I sent you? And I said, yeah, I got the doll. What the hell is it? So he tells me the story, and I'm starting to get a little freaked out because I'm starting to put all this together. Here's my name, here's this, holy crap, you know? So anyways, that's kind of the story, and it's still a kind of an anomaly. Oh, there's more. Wait, there's more to the story. So anyways, I'm a logistics guy. So I happen to end up working for Disney. In one of their warehouse. I did work for Disney. I mean, when I worked for Disney, I didn't work for Disney, but I did contract work for Disney. So anyways, I'm there, and they hear my name, and they grab me, and they're touring me around. Some guy came from some head guy for their logistics. He's touring me around the warehouse, and he's picking up the dolls. Oh, here's Mike Wazowski, a real Mike Wazowski. Here's the doll, and he's going like freaking out, and I'm just embarrassed as hell because they're touring me around. Like they found
kind of the look on your face, like.
So anyways, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So.
Oh, I just love that. That's absolutely hilarious. I can just picture the look on your face, like, what is going on here?
I know.
It's some alternate dimension.
That was the connection between me and these dolls, you know, it's crazy.
Well, I think on that note, we'll wrap up, because that was definitely that was one that people can laugh about. That was perfect. Yeah. But thank you guys so much. It was wonderful having you on, and obviously we're going to keep in touch, and we'll have to have you back. And yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.